Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sedan. Just beautiful, beautiful words that go to my heart. And of course, it's just a pleasure to be a friend to you and a friend to the Istanbul Sangha. Yeah, really sad that I'm not actually there with you in person, which we were planning for. But here we are on Zoom, which is the next best thing at the moment. So yeah, I'm really happy to be meeting all of you who I haven't met before. Thanks for coming along. And hopefully, as Vajrachakshu said earlier, something in the talk tonight will touch you. So the talk's called Human Potential. And I want to start with a poem. I'm not going to read the whole poem, but it's called The Summer's Day by Mary Oliver. She's an American poet, and in the poem she's been wandering in a summer field all day. And as poets do, she's been pondering the life, universe, and everything. What she realizes in the poem is that she doesn't know how to pray, which is a bit of a strange thing to say, but it gives me the sense that she's grateful for something. What she says she does know how to do is to pay attention, how to see what's immediately in front of her. And with that paying attention in the poem comes knowledge that life is fleeting and death comes to everything. So everything in that summer field has a lifespan and at one point will end. So even the perfect summer's day will end. So she asks in the final lines of the poem, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Oh, and even as I say it, that line just reverberates in me. And I recall it quite often. It reverberates in me like a mantra. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? To me, it feels really, really full of possibility. I hear an invitation from the poet to enter into not just the wildness, but the preciousness of life. I feel the depth and the breadth of a greater potential, and it feels really exciting. So I can tell you that many years ago, the poet's question probably would have been more daunting to me. It may have even caused confusion and despair. It may have provoked anxiety that I didn't know what I wanted to do with this one wild and precious life. Perhaps I would have felt that my situation was that I was more trapped and powerless, that I was just a cog in a wheel. Siddhartha Gautama, the future Buddha, was a human being, and he lived about 2,500 years ago in India. And he also had this question. He wondered how best to live his life. He probably wasn't wondering about the wild and precious, but, what was the best way to live this life? His questioning was deep, and he questioned what he saw in ordinary, everyday life. And it propelled him to look for the answers to what makes a truly satisfying human life. So as we know, we probably all know the Buddhist story. He grew up in a world of pleasure and ease, in a wealthy family clan, maybe in a palace. They say he was a prince. But what we know is that he didn't want for anything, and yet he was still not happy. So he sensed that there was more to life and became perplexed, that he could experience so much pleasure and also experience this underlying unease and suffering. So he saw suffering in a very specific way, in what's called the four sights. He saw an old man, he saw a man who was sick, and he saw a man who was dead being carried to the cremation ground. And within those three of the four sights, he saw the basic vulnerability of the human state: old age, sickness, and death. They're unescapable, unpredictable. And because of that, they cause us to live in fear. It makes us cling more tightly to what we love and don't want to lose. And he saw that's what causes us suffering, dukkha. So just trying to put ourselves in the picture of 2,500 years ago, when the Buddha saw these sites where there was no sanitation, no healthcare, no modern medicine to make those sufferings more bearable, we can understand maybe a little bit more how the Buddha might have felt when he had that realization. And that might help us understand the full impact of how he saw those sites. But in the current crisis that we're in, the pandemic, I feel it's more relevant than ever. I think we're seeing those sites right up close. We know that our older populations are being shielded due to their vulnerability. I think they're being asked to stay at home here in the UK. It's probably similar in Turkey. We're seeing that the coronavirus affects all people across the world. It doesn't discriminate whoever you are. It doesn't discriminate age, race, nation, gender, any of those things. It's a particularly dangerous virus as we've got no immunity to it. So the people I know who've had coronavirus, makes them very, very ill. And it has, if they recover, a very long recovery period. So we are seeing unprecedented numbers of deaths due to the virus. And the tragedy, I think, of this time is seeing people dying alone because of the social distancing and how contagious the virus is. They're having to have their final breaths on their own. Added to that is the suffering of the loved ones who can't be with them. And that's particularly poignant, I think, at this time. So I feel much, much, much more aware of old age, suffering, sickness, and death. It's quite frightening, sad, and very sobering. My hope in that is that it will lead us to really have a look at our lives and really, kind of reevaluate what's most important to us. I'm really hoping that we just won't go back to normal. And I'm sure there'll be parts of society that do just go back to normal, but I think for many, many people, they'll be reevaluating how they want to live their life. So I think there's a real opportunity for us there. And we know in the story that the fourth site that the Buddha saw was a man in orange kind of robes, rags. He was the orange-clad holy man, a mendicant, a searcher for the truth, one living by spiritual values. And that sight showed Siddhartha the way forward. That if he really wanted to find out the answers, the way beyond old age, sickness, and death, that he needed to follow the holy life. And he was compelled by that. He was compelled to go on a quest for the truth himself. And he was determined not to give up until he'd found a way to be free of these sufferings. So that vision of the holy man made him go on his quest. It's referred to as his going forth, or the noble quest. And he, with determination, pursued the end of suffering. He really, really longed for freedom, and not just for himself, but for others too. So we have to remember, it wasn't just his own suffering he wanted to penetrate. He wanted to give that kind of to others as well. And he did attain it. His determined efforts to penetrate to the roots of the human condition were successful. He became enlightened, awakened, he became a Buddha. And the awakening experience of the Buddha is full of imagery, utterances of verse, and really deep, penetrative insight. So one of the most beautiful insights of the Buddha on awakening is expressed when he sees a vision of a pond. And in the pond, there are blue, red, or white lotuses. You know, lotuses, the big Indian flowers. And they grow with their roots in the mud. But in the vision, the Buddha sees them growing up through the water and up into the sky. He sees them all in different stages of growth. So some have their buds tightly closed. Some of the lotuses have opened, but they're sitting on the water. And some of the lotuses have their stems have really kind of gone beyond the water and they've opened fully up into the sky. So in the vision, the Buddha saw the lotuses like beings, like us, in our differing capacities to hear the truth. And it was that vision that gave the Buddha the courage to teach the Dharma. He knew we could understand. He knew we could follow this way beyond suffering. So Buddhism is concerned with the potential of all beings, not just humans, but animals as well, and any other beings that may exist. But it's especially concerned with human beings. It's humans that have the most capacity to see what the Buddha saw and to overcome dukkha, to find freedom. But what makes us human from a Buddhist perspective? Yeah, I think of myself, I take this body, it's covered in skin, I've got my muscles, my bones, the internal organs, I'm breathing, I'm alive. You know, is that what it is to be human? Descartes, the French philosopher, said, "I think, therefore I am." Is that what makes me human? That I can think, that I have a mind? Is having a body and a brain, is that what makes me human? So the Buddhist perspective has us take a closer look at what we might take for granted. And tonight, that's what we're going to do. We're going to look more deeply to see what we find out about the human situation. And we're going to have the help of a traditional Buddhist symbol. It's an image called the Wheel of Life, or the Wheel of Becoming, the Bhava Chakra. So you might be familiar with it. It's an image of samsara, which is a term for ordinary conditioned existence. Samsara has the meaning to flow or flowing on in the terms of a stream of consciousness, either from one moment to the next, or, if you believe in rebirth, from one life to the next. It's a symbol that you'll find painted outside the doors of most Tibetan temples, outside the shrine room, just as you go in to enter meditation. There it is, a reminder of ordinary life. So you can have one last look before you go into the temple to do your meditation, in the hope of trying to get yourself free of the wheel of life. And it encapsulates in symbolic form some of the key insights of the Buddha on his awakening. And he spent the rest of his life teaching those insights. So it illustrates the key causes of suffering and how we can free ourselves from suffering. And I always assumed that the image was medieval. For some reason, that's kind of what I associated it with. But the image has references right back to the time of the Buddha. And any of you who are teachers know that images are a wonderful way to teach, especially in a pre-literate society. But even so, I find it has a really big impact on me. I think it taps deep into my unconscious. Yeah, when I see the image. On one level, it looks really simplistic, but as I look deeper, it starts to resonate with me. And so it takes a bit of courage to begin to look. It has a lot of potency as a symbol. And part of that potency is that this image is a mirror. And what we generally encounter in a mirror is an image of ourselves. A bit like I'm looking into this screen right now, seeing myself talking. So we're going to look into the mirror and see what we see of ourselves from a Buddhist perspective. So I'm going to share my screen and hope this works. I hope you can all see that. Maybe somebody could give me a thumbs up. You can see it. Great, fantastic. And we'll just take a moment or two to have a look at the image and take it in. We're going to go into the image more and more deeply. And you can see there are 4 circles. It's very colourful. It's quite busy. There's a lot going on in the mirror. There's a lot going on in our human consciousness. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing the screen there. I hope that was enough time just to have a look, and you know, you can always have a look after the talk, have a look more fully. But actually, let's have a look. We are going to look a little bit more closely. I do have an image of the first 2. Let's get rid of that one. There we go. So this is the inner 2 wheels. So as we look more closely, well, remember we're looking at ourselves. Right in the inner wheel, that's the hub. And we can see 3 animals. We can see a cock, a snake, and a pig. Yeah, and they're chasing each other around. They're biting each other's tails, round and round. They're driving the wheel in a never-ending circle. So these 3 animals represent greed, that's the cock, hatred is the snake, and delusion is the pig. They're the 3 poisons, and they're the root of all our suffering. Sangharakshita, something I was reading from him about this, he said that just naming them, greed, hatred, and delusion, lets us off lightly. He says if we really look into the hub and we see the cock, the snake, and the pig, what we're really seeing is our own animal nature. Yeah? So we may be taken a little bit aback, you know, if we really take that in, that we're not as civilized as perhaps we thought we were. So in a way, we're starting here with our animal nature laid bare. Great. So I think it's really important not to judge this too harshly. You know, after all, we are animals. You know, scientifically classified, we're mammals in the order of primates called Homo sapiens. And I think it's really important for us to accept our basic instinctive drives. In evolutionary terms, you know, these instinctive drives mean that we're really hardwired to protect ourselves by fighting or fleeing if our life's in danger, elbowing people out of the way if we're not sure we've got enough food, defending our territory, fighting rivals in mating. It's all the selfishness of survival. And we know that the animals don't think about this. It's just instinctual. That's just how they act. So this hardwired sense for us as we have evolved, I suppose, we've kind of evolved with this complex sense of self. And those drives are still present. So we do feel the need to defend and protect ourselves, perhaps our loved ones and our clan. I think this was kind of brought home to me, you know, recently at the beginning of the pandemic, when I started to see photographs of shopping, you know, supermarkets with empty shelves of toilet paper, of all things. Feels like years ago that was happening. But it was like a mob mentality of hoarding. In the UK and in other places around the world, people were panic buying, loading trolleys full of the toilet paper, the rice, flour, pasta, sanitizer gel. I wasn't even sure we'd be in some kind of lockdown. It just seemed like people had a sense of it and went a bit mad. If you went to a supermarket at that time, the atmosphere was of extreme anxiety and selfishness. The panic buying just left the shelves empty, so it didn't leave things for other people who may have missed out on supplies. So I found it really curious that in a crisis, our animal behavior just kicks in, and that instinctual greed and selfishness is on the surface. So from where I was standing, it looked a bit silly. But to those people behind the shopping trolleys, it was some kind of life and death situation. And that was really real to them. They couldn't, stand back and see things from a bigger perspective. They were just kind of like driven by that animal kind of nature. So that's kind of our inner circle, the hub, what's driving us, our kind of animal nature of greed, hatred, and delusion. So I'm just going to show you the image again, because then you can see the second wheel. So here you can see we've got on the left-hand side, you've got a white section. Right-hand side, you've got a black section. On the right half, you've got beings ascending. They're wearing clothes. They look very well dressed. They're ascending on clouds. It's all very heavenly as they move upwards. And then on the other side, you can see we've got beings in chains, falling downwards, guarded by these red demon-like beings. So it's very black and white, really. The image is just showing us two alternatives. We can move upwards through positive actions or downwards through unwholesome, unskillful, or negative actions. So it's just showing very kind of straightforwardly how our actions have an effect. And unless we find a way off the wheel, we might move up, but then there's always the potential to fall down again. So it's kind of like a game of snakes and ladders, where we can never guarantee kind of where we are on it. Right, so they're the first two segments. And then we come to the third look into the mirror. And that's where we have 6 large segments around the first 2. And these segments are the 6 realms of existence. I don't have pictures to show you more fully, so we're going to have to just use our imagination. And I'll try and evoke them for you. So each segment in this realm shows us beings in particular states that kind of mirror either our momentary states of mind, or perhaps states of mind that we inhabit more habitually. So as we look, you can think for yourself, maybe I visit that realm sometimes, but maybe that one's where, when push comes to shove, when, the pandemic's on, that's where I habitually kind of live. So we can have a look at that. So we start with the top section of these realms. And this is the realm of the gods. So as you might imagine from the title, it's a realm where everything comes easily, a god realm. You just have to wish it and it appears. It's a realm of extreme pleasure and aesthetic enjoyment. It's also a realm of aesthetic appreciation and the arts. It's like the arts lift one up. Even meditation, kind of like it's beings that have perhaps been meditating and it's taken them to higher states of consciousness. And there's no obstacles, no suffering, just refinement and extreme pleasure. These beings, however, are quite intoxicated with their suffering. They're not aware of others. They're just aware of their own pleasure and enjoyment. What they're not aware of, however, is their pleasure can't last. Yeah, so they're not aware that their pleasure can't last. So those in the God realm, these are our healthy and wealthy beings who don't have to make much effort, and things come easily. So I think sometimes of Hollywood stars. I was going to try and pronounce the Turkish film industry kind of word. Yeşilkam? Yes, he'll come. Yeah, okay, I've got a thumbs up. That's great. You know, the musicians and artists that live in a very, very refined world. Yeah, but totally obsessed with themselves and their pleasure, and not aware of others, not aware of what else is going on in the world. Okay, so that's our gods. Hopefully you've got an image of them, a lot of beauty and pleasure there. So we're going to move along to the section of beings called the Asuras. Now these are jealous gods, often called titans. They're aggressive, competitive, jealous, restless, suspicious, and always fighting. So between them and the God realm is the wish-fulfilling tree, and they're perpetually fighting the gods over the wish-fulfilling tree. They strive endlessly for material wealth. They always want to be better, to dominate. So it's a realm of conflict and war. So if we think of you know, places where there's conflict and war around the world, you're sure to be finding people in the Asura realm. So they have a really big egos, yeah. And their egos have no bounds. They need to be the best, the richest, the smartest, the funniest, the most successful. And they'll stop at nothing to get it. So you can think of politicians, you can think of business magnates, and Sangharakshita says you can think of argumentative intellectuals or academics. He says they often kind of can, you know, kind of hold a lot of, even though there's quite a lot of wisdom, there's also a lot of kind of hatred or competitiveness in how they approach their areas of study. So that's a glimpse into the Asura world. Okay, so moving down the circle, we come to the realm of the hungry ghosts, the praetors. And these beings are consumed by neurotic desire. They seek more from things than things can actually give them. So they're always disappointed and never satisfying. It's craving that can never be satisfied. So when you look more closely at the image, you can see beings with very large distended stomachs, very, very long necks, and little tiny mouths, like a needle. So that even though they're forever hungry, they can't actually really take anything in. And if they do take food in, it turns to excrement. If they do take in liquid, it turns to fire, which sounds just absolutely horrible. That sounds like a horrible state to be in. They're tortured because of this. So every attempt to satiate their hunger, you know, turns into a torture. So yes, I feel just awful just thinking about it, you know, but in a way, I can see that in a more, you know, kind of subtle way in ourselves when we crave sweets, holidays, cakes, entertainment, sex, relationships. You know, kind of, we grasp for things that we think are going to satisfy us, not realizing that those things can't truly make us happy. So this is the world of consumerism that drives people on to fulfill needs, often needs they didn't even know they had. In fact, the advertising industry is all based on that. that it's creating need that we didn't even know we had. So it preys on our addictive drives, these neurotic addictive drives, where we keep grasping for satisfaction and happiness. So that's our hungry ghosts. So as we move down the circle, we come to the hell realm. This is where hell beings live. It's a realm of acute mental suffering, mental breakdown, frustration, killing and violence, torture. Primarily it's a realm of hatred and aversion. They're the kind of main kind of mental states, and unconscious mental conflicts. It's a place of extreme pain. So you can imagine the beings who might be in this realm, people suffering from mental health issues, perhaps those in kind of psychiatric institutions, people who are really kind of afflicted by the states of their mind. And I can feel my voice dropping because I feel kind of, just the pain of being in that realm. And I suppose if you've ever experienced a level of perhaps depression or extreme anxiety, that kind of might touch on the suffering that gets worse in that realm. Okay, so moving around, we come to the realm of the animals. And it's really just a realm of sensual indulgence. So it's beings with a strong interest in eating, drinking, sleeping, and sex. What's wrong with that? It's basically about satisfying our base desires, these animal desires. And the thing that's wrong with it is that there's no self-awareness there. Maybe it's fine to visit from time to time, but there's no self-awareness there. It's a realm dominated by ignorance, and it lacks any kind of culture. So there's a lack of inertia that just keeps people in a state of dullness. And it's generally a peaceful realm until, as we know, as I was talking about earlier, our animal nature is threatened, and then it can become very violent. Yeah. So that's the animal realm. And as we move around, we get to the last realm, which is the human realm. So this realm, in this realm, consciousness is aware of itself and aware of others. So in this realm, beings are not so overwhelmed by suffering as in the hells or the Preta realms or the kind of jealous God realms. So we're not so disabled by suffering, and we're also not intoxicated like the gods with pleasure. And we're not as sleepy as the animals. There's a healthy mix of pleasure and discomfort. So you can expect to find in this realm reasonably mature and responsible beings. Yeah. Beings who have the ability to make choices, to reflect, beings who have the ability to become aware, and beings who have the ability to empathize with the other realms. Yeah, because they experience both pleasure and pain. So there we are, there are our 6 realms. And I'm wondering if you can recognize yourself in any of these different realms. And again, maybe thinking which ones we visit from time to time and which ones that we inhabit a little bit more habitually. Yeah. So that's always a good question to ask ourselves. And it's a really good way to gauge ourselves on a kind of like map of maybe where we're coming from. So from the Buddhist perspective, even though the God realm is the most pleasurable, it's the human realm that's most desirable. Yeah. And I make this mistake over and over again in my own life. I want to be that Hollywood star and have an easy life and you know, kind of, it seems so good, it looks so pleasurable to have everything you want. But actually, from the Buddhist point of view, it's not the best place to be. It's only from the human realm that you can actually attain enlightenment. So it's only by becoming enlightened that you can free yourself from being driven to the, you know, kind of by the hub of greed, hatred, and delusion. So because of that, the human realm is like an axial realm. It offers a unique opportunity for spiritual development. So as I said, we've got enough suffering and enough pleasure to propel us into the spiritual life. So that balance allows us to see our situation. And really fundamentally, it allows us to make choices about how we want to respond to our situation. Yeah, to this situation that we see in this wheel of becoming. So I'll just kind of like just tell you a little bit about the extreme limitations of the other realms for gaining enlightenment, to hopefully kind of help you see why the human state is so important in terms of our spiritual development. So you may have picked this up already, but the gods are too self-absorbed with their happiness, and they have no thoughts of changing. Why would they change? Everything is just fabulous from their point of view. Yeah, so no thought of changing. The Asuras, the jealous gods, they're just too full of hatred. They're consumed by their desire for material success, and therefore they have no thought of spiritual development. They have no time, they have no energy. All their energy is going into their success on a worldly level. The hungry ghosts, being obsessed by their craving and neurotic desire, they seek happiness, but they constantly seek it where it's not possible. Yeah, they don't have enough awareness to see that the things they seek pleasure in won't bring them happiness, you know, due to their neurotic kind of craving. The hell beings are just so oppressed by their suffering that they totally lose perspective on, you know, the kind of ability to kind of be more open or to have choices. So they see no way out of their suffering in that oppression. And the animals just have no, you know, they're just not self-aware. They have no concept of the possibility of spiritual evolution, so they have no way to bring it about. Yeah. So the human realm is the realm that allows us to access and harness our full potential towards enlightenment. And this is a key, I think, insight for me in my practice over the last few years. It's like, if I really, really want to practice the Dharma effectively, and if I really, really want to awaken to the truths of the Dharma, I need to inhabit and be in the human realm as much as I possibly can. That feels like a real something to really achieve and attain. And from that position, I'll also not only be able to benefit myself, but benefit others as well. So it feels really important. It requires effort and it requires awareness. That's not a given. You know, we have to practice. And the opportunity's there in the human realm, but it's up to us to take it up. And if we don't, as we've seen, we can just get drawn back into the other realms. So we may recognize our tendencies to be in one realm more than the other. And I think that's a good thing. We really need to see this. Yeah, we're looking in the mirror. It's the mirror of ourselves. And we have to be able to kind of like look at it, you know, kind of, you know, straight. So there's a poem by Rumi that I really love called The Guest House, in which he says, "This being human is a guest house. Every day a new arrival." So the arrivals that come in his poem are joys, depression, a meanness, a crowd of sorrows, a dark thought, shame, malice. Not the guests you were hoping for. I think generally if those guests knock on the door, you kind of like, sorry, I'm not home. You know, we shut the door quite quickly to those experiences. But Rumi, I think, in his open, accepting wisdom, suggests that we welcome them into the guest house. We even treat them honorably, even when they steal everything from you. In the poem, he says they're teachers towards being fully human and having a fully human experience. And I think that if we're not welcoming these parts of us, these parts that we see in the 6 realms, if we're not welcoming them, we're rejecting them. They go unconscious and they drive us from the shadows of unawareness. So generally we don't like to admit to our mean, jealous, lazy, unfulfilled parts of ourselves that can be full of hatred and aversion. But I think acknowledging those parts can be very, very powerful. So as we take a look in the mirror, we can just take in the whole of us. And I think it's the whole of us, when we can do that, that we can see what we need to work on and how we can kind of move towards being more in the human realm. So like Rumi, the Buddhist perspective, it's not trying to show us how bad we are. You know, terrible people, you know, you've got all these negative emotions, negative tendencies. What it's trying to do is just show us the reality of our situation. So that's what we're doing at the moment. Buddhism's keen to show us these parts of ourselves, partly because it's a really great motivational factor when we see our shortcomings and we see the negative effect it has on us. And the negative effect it has on others. Deep down, we want to be happy. We want others to be happy. So by looking closely, we see that we're going about happiness the wrong way. The Dharma also shows us that we can change. We can transform those energies through awareness, through mindfulness, through metta. That is possible. And we've probably all experienced that, you know, kind of for ourselves. And the states that lead us to happiness, they're based on the truth of existence. They're the only way that we can find a happiness that endures. Mindfulness, metta, awareness, they take us to a happiness that endures, a deeper happiness. So I think we can acknowledge the shadow and the unskillfulness, but look at how do we transform them. Yeah. And fortunately, in the wheel of life, in looking in the mirror, we'll see that too. So in each realm, there's a Buddha, and it shows beings the key to their transformation. So I'm just going to tell you about those Buddhas and how give us a sense of how we can transform in each of those realms. So when we notice we're in one of those realms, we also know how to transform that, how to get out of that realm, what might help us do that. So I think I've skipped one here. Yes, in the God realm, there's a white Buddha, and he's playing a musical instrument, an ancient Indian instrument called the veena. It's like a lute, and it plays a beautiful melody. So music is a language that the gods understand. So they understand melody and music, but this melody is the melody of impermanence. So it reminds the gods that no matter how intense their pleasure is, it will not last. Yeah, it cannot last, as the samsaric world is one of impermanence. It wakes them up to the temporary, fleeting nature of life. And even though their life seems heavenly, it's not enlightenment. There's more work to be done and other beings to think of. So it's really hard to get the attention of the Asuras, the jealous gods. They're so busy fighting, getting ahead. So the Buddha here is green and carries a flaming sword, you know, a symbol of war they can relate to. But it represents flaming wisdom. It wakes them up to a success that is not worldly, but spiritual, and shows the victory of engaging their intellects in the spiritual quest. Yeah. So all those argumentative academics can use their wisdom for spiritual goals. The hungry ghosts have a red Buddha that showers food and drink on them that they can actually take in. It's a spiritual nourishment that will truly satisfy their craving and allow them to see what truly satisfies. In the hell realm, there's a Buddha of smoky blue-grey. He holds a jar of amrita or ambrosia, a healing nectar that gives respite from suffering. But amrita is more than that. Amrita is a taste of enlightenment itself. So in the hell realm, people are given a taste. They're shown the freedom that could be theirs through transformation. And then the Buddha in the animal realm is blue and shows them a book. It's a symbol of the need to overcome laziness and dullness of mind through becoming civilized. So to hear the Dharma, one has to have some aptitude for it. So a basic level of openness to learning is needed for the animals. And finally, in the human realm, there's a yellow or golden Buddha holding a begging bowl and a staff. And these are the symbols of the spiritual seeker, the holy person. So in the human realm, we've got the chance to devote ourselves to our spiritual development. And it's here that we have the least obstacles and the most capacity to do that. So all beings, no matter in what realm, have the potential for enlightenment. The Buddha seeds are there in every realm. And that reminds me again of the beautiful vision of the Buddha of the lotuses and our different capacities for spiritual development. So one more part of the wheel to look at. It's made up of 12 sections. It's the last rim of the wheel. They run around the whole outer edge of the wheel and have some very curious images I invite you to have a look at later on. So they represent the insight of the Buddha on enlightenment as to the cause and effect of how suffering arises and how suffering can cease. It's the 12 links of the Nidana chain, or a symbolic representation of cause and effect, often referred broadly to as karma, or causality, conditioned co-production, or praticchit samutpada. So it shows how we pass from one conditioned state to the next, endlessly on a round from birth to death. This happens in unawareness, the mind in a reactive state. It perpetuates and compounds suffering over and over again. So the human realm then is just seen as the place where we can really practice the Dharma. And there are some traditional reflections that help us really, really appreciate what it's like to see this realm of conditioned existence. So I'm just going to tell you a parable, really, about that kind of illustrates this sense of the preciousness of human life. So you need to imagine in the ocean that there's a very, very old turtle. And once every 100 years, it comes to the surface of the ocean. On the surface of the ocean is a battered yolk with a hole through it, and it's been floating aimlessly for hundreds of years on the surface of the ocean, washed this way and that. So imagine the likelihood of the turtle surfacing and putting its neck through the battered old yolk. It's pretty improbable. It's perhaps miraculous. But that is equates to the same possibility of attaining the human state. So the human state in Buddhism is seen as very precious indeed. And this reflection is the first of a set that are known as the 4 mind-turning reflections. So in the human state, we can start to really turn the mind to the Dharma, to the teachings of the Buddha, to help us strengthen the resolve towards our spiritual development. So the first of the 4 reminders is that, as illustrated in the parable of the turtle, that this human life is precious. Yeah. The message here is to not waste this opportunity. We may not realize the human state. It's hard won. So we have created sufficient positive karma to be in the human realm. And I think probably most of us are there most of the time. Here we can hear the Dharma and act on it. We're free enough to put the teachings into action and have the awareness to see the effects of our actions and strengthen our faith in the practices. This is a momentous opportunity. Secondly, we reflect that life is impermanent and death is certain. This is the truth of change. Everything changes, nothing lasts. Ourselves and all we love will die. No one can escape death. When we deny this, we cling to life, people, things, and it causes us great pain when they no longer exist. So reflecting on impermanence, we have the opportunity to see that we can train the mind to accept this truth. We can learn to face death, scary as it might be. We can train to let go, to stop fighting this reality, to face it with courage and compassion. However, we're always reminded that time is short. There's no time to waste. So we need to stop procrastinating. This reflection can help us to see the urgency of the human situation. Okay, and thirdly, we can reflect on the law of karma. All our actions have an effect. Things aren't completely random. We can't always know what the effect of our actions is, but we can acknowledge that we have choices in how we act. And those choices give us a powerful opportunity to shape our lives. So we can change how we think, how we feel, how we act more in accordance with reality. We know that meanness and anger can harm others. We know that kindness and generosity can help others. So we have the chance to make those choices. And lastly, we reflect on the kind of the defects of this samsaric world. And the wheel of life has just laid it all out for us. The suffering that we experience due to being driven by greed, hatred, and delusion. The confusion and suffering we cause wandering aimlessly, drawn by our habitual states of mind. So these are the defects of samsara. And if we look at just one day in our life, how many realms might we inhabit in one day, let alone in 1 hour? So we can reflect on the mind states of the 6 realms and ask ourselves where we want to be, who we want to be, what kind of world do we want to create? And these reflections can motivate us to see the unique opportunities of the human realm, of the human mind and heart. Fortunately, the Dharma gives us a definite direction of travel, but the human realm is still in samsara. So when we look in the mirror once again and we see the whole wheel, the whole of samsara, it's in the jaws of this mighty beast, Yama, the Lord of Death, and he's holding, just going to put the image up again, he's holding the wheel. Oh, I've lost him, but I'll put this one up. This is just the face. You can see he's got his fangs into the wheel. He's got his hands, his claws, his feet are holding the wheel. Yama is Lord of Death, and he's got us firmly in his grip. So I often have the sense that Yama is kind of like biting into my neck. Yeah, he's just kind of like a vampire. You know, and I wonder, how am I going to shake him free? How am I going to shake him free? So when you look at the image again, behind the mirror, in the blue sky, what we see is a Buddha. And the Buddha is the embodiment of enlightenment itself, when we're out of the grip of the monster. And the Buddha in the right-hand corner, he points to the full moon, which is a symbol of the bodhisattva, our own potential to kind of transform the wheel of life, to get free of samsara. So in every realm there's potential, as seen by the Buddhas offering their gifts there. And we've got the potential to really become more creative in our mind states. The potential of the human who practices the Dharma diligently is freedom from suffering and entering into the wisdom and compassion of the Buddhas. And that's the best place we can benefit the world. So being free of samsara means seeing our existence as it really is, warts and all. And that's what we've been doing this evening. So after having a good look in the mirror, I'm going to ask the poet's question again. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with this one wild and precious life?